Welcome everybody. It is Business Monday here at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I want to thank our friends over at Deepwater Wind. Lots of things going on today. Lots and lots of storm preparation as we're expecting the third big northeaster of March, I guess, expected to hit. And our meteorologist, John Giorsi, says it is going to be a big one. And if you know John Giorsi, he's always on the conservative side. We're going to talk with Liz Tanner from Department of Business Regulation up first. Is Liz in the house? Liz? Oh, Liz?
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Good
Great to see you. So you are in charge of functionally the regulatory functions overseeing businesses in Rhode Island.
For the most part, yes.
All right, and you are both beloved and cursed, I guess, on a regular basis.
Yes.
But you're trying to sort of work, the governor's had a big initiative to try and strip out some of the regulatory red tape, as it's called. Talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that you guys are working on.
Well, we originally went out and talked to lots and lots of business owners. So
You did not talk to us, I'm just saying.
we went to over 400 events, mostly trade organization meetings, chambers of commerce, merchants associations, anybody we could think of that had sort of groups of businesses in a room. We talked to over 4,000 either business owners or workers, and we said, what is it that makes you crazy? What is it that is a problem for you? And interesting part to us is, while sometimes it is the regulations,
Sure.
and sometimes it is the laws, it is far more about cutting the paperwork, right?
Yeah.
The burdensome paperwork, it is the poor processes, bad customer service, and more often than not, it's how am I supposed to know?
Yeah.
How am I supposed to know where to find things out? So that's what we've been trying to work on with the Office of Regulatory Reform. They are doing a process where they go through all of the regulations, cutting out 3,800 pages so far, I believe, and ultimately it's all going to be online so that you can search it. So when you want to become a plumber and you want to know what you have to do, you can put in plumber and it'll all pop up for you. So that is going to be huge, because right now it's really hard to find out what the regulations are that relate to your profession.
There's a ton of them, and they all vary, and they're all complex. I think one of them that there was a little bit of reform on that drives maybe every business owner in Rhode Island insane is that, especially when you have multiple LLCs, is that an LLC has to pay an annual fee of, now it's $450. It used to be $500. And I'm not sure how many we have, but we probably have 3 or 4 in Rhode Island. And it might be the most absurd requirement. Are we going to see any changes on that one?
Well, first we're down to 400. It was at
Oh, is it
500.
down to 400?
Yep, it went down to 450, and now we're down at 400.
Excellent.
There are only 2 states in the country that don't charge it. So as
Yeah.
much as it's really annoying, know that pretty much every other state does require it. And yes, it is a challenge because a lot of people don't know they have to pay it. That's
Right.
the hard part.
Yeah.
So if you don't necessarily have a good tax preparer or know that you have to pay it, it's very hard to even know that you have to pay it. So yes, we are looking at reducing it. We're looking at getting rid of it. There's a lot of things we're looking to do there, and I would really like to make a change because I think that would be dramatic. You know, it's something that everybody has to be.
Well, it limits innovation because a lot of times you have businesses who want to spin off something and create a separate LLC. And one of the barriers is I'm not sure it's going to work. Do I really want to spend, all those steps and things like that? Talk a little bit, and we're going to come back to cleaning up the regulatory structure. Talk a little bit about your scope. DBR, Department of Business Regulation, is one of these small departments that have massive requirements. Just about everybody falls under you, it seems like, sometimes.
Well, and most people think they do.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, we only have what we have, right?
Yeah.
So we have banking. We have all the banks.
That's a big category.
Big category.
You've got the credit unions.
We have the credit unions. We have all the insurance providers, and there's
Yeah.
lots of different kinds of insurance.
Right.
So we have the insurance providers.
Including healthcare.
The
Blue
Office
Crosses.
of Healthcare Commissioner, yes, they do fall under the DBR umbrella.
Yeah.
We also have commercial licensing, and that really takes sort of the potpourri of licensing. We have liquor for breweries and things like that.
Yeah.
Not liquor licenses for restaurants, that's a local issue.
Yeah.
But we also have marijuana, that's very interesting, of course. We have auto body shops, we have, securities, we have this wide range of other kinds of business types, so engineers, accountants, land surveyors.
Do you have hair braiders?
We do not.
That's health department?
Well, that That is under the cosmetology,
Uh-huh.
under Department of Health, but we are proposing to bring it to DVR.
Excellent.
So we would like to try to take the 13-page application to become a hairdresser, try to reduce that down to something that's a little more tolerable, and put the forms online. So we're striving to do that in the governor's budget this year.
Excellent. Talk about one of the things we've written about numerous times and talked to Mike DeBiase's office a number of times about is and I'm gonna put it in the most positive structure. Rhode Island is just behind in applying technology to things like this. You know, we operate in other states, we have other GoLocals, and in those states, so many of them, so much of the business you do with the state can be done online. And in Rhode Island, it's getting better, but so little of it can be done online. How do we jumpstart that? I mean, a lot of these things that just become an amazing nuisance and have to be costly. There's some things we get mailings from regulatory structures that have nothing to do with our business, but we're on some list somehow, and we get one of these mailings every quarter. It has nothing to do with our business. I mean, I don't care if it's 30 cents that the state has to. We've gotten them for 8 years since we've been in business, and we've probably got, 1,000 mailings. Talk a little bit about how we can speed up that process to help businesses and cut down state expense.
We've actually done a lot in that space in the last few years. The Department of Business Regulation is actually one of the, if not the only, state agency where every form you need to do with us is online to fill out in the first place.
Who knows this? When are you going to tell somebody?
And to renew. So every single thing that DBR covers is completely electronic.
It's all Matt Sheaf's fault. I'm putting it straight out. Nobody knows, and it's Sheaf's fault.
You also, at the Department of Health, while most of your forms are not available to do originally, you can renew just about everything online.
Okay.
So at least you can renew things. Secretary of State's office, as you know, is fantastic. They've got everything online.
It's better.
From day one to the end. But of note, there's been 2 efforts that I think you'll find particularly interesting. First, municipalities. So we've done an initiative, $3,000 initiative, where the state pays $1,000, the Rhode Island Foundation feels strongly enough about it that they've paid $1,000, and the community pays $1,000 or less, depending on the size of the community. And we've had 23 communities go through this, where they streamlined the business registration and licensing process. And instead of me as a business owner having to go from one place, fill out a form, write a check, next place, fill out a form, write a check, over and over and over again, they've now created one singular form that says, this is what I'm doing, this is whatever my business type is. The form goes out to whoever it needs to go out to, and then they all work with each other, so that I don't have to go from place to place to place. That has been going on for about a year, 2 years now. Some communities are now putting that form online so that you can order online and you can do things that way. For example, in the city of Pawtucket, to open up a restaurant, it used to take 11 visits to City Hall, at a minimum, 11 visits. Now, with this new form and this new system that they've set up, it's 0. Yeah, they kind of still want you to come in once, but really it's 1 visit to go in, and everything at least is in motion. So rather than you having to go from place to place to place, now it's all online, or I'm talking to somebody, or we're emailing, whatever it might be.
Providence has not adopted that similar streamlined structure.
While they may not have adopted the streamlined structure, they are putting far more of their licenses onto an online system. In fact, the system that they're using is a software called Viewpoint, and the reason they have it is because we have electronic permitting. So the state of Rhode Island now has 22 municipalities who are doing their fire and building permits online. What's particularly interesting about that is the municipality is connected to the state. As far as we know, this is the only state in the country that's doing this, so that when you want to order a permit in Providence, and you're having to coordinate with building and fire, you're all talking to each other. So you can see that it went from John to Mary to Bob, and you can see where it's at so that you can reach out and have that interaction. So the feedback that we've heard is that it makes it a whole lot easier because they can do it from their phones if they really want to. It makes it transparent so they can see where it is, and it just makes business a whole lot easier because
Can the public see it as well?
You can go in and have access to the same information you used to have. But I, as the applicant, I can go in and see where it's at.
Okay. And talk a little bit about some of the other reforms you've got before the legislature this year. You've got kind of a package to try and advance some of these initiatives. Walk us through those.
So we talked about how we went out and talked to everybody, right? And it was interesting because in the beginning we were really out to talk about all the programs and services that Commerce offers, because very few people know what the Commerce Corporation does for small and local businesses. And we started hearing their complaints and their concerns. And it's funny, I started literally just writing it down. on a piece of paper. And then we kind of advanced to an Excel spreadsheet, and then we realized we were on to some really important information about things that we wanted to change and make better. So that's what this bill is. It's between 15 and 22, depending on how you count it, small changes to make it easier to do business. So a lot of it is the removal of notarization requirements so that we can put the forms online, because if it has to be notarized, you can't put it online. We don't have that ability. So that's a big part of it. But it's also things like, if you become a food safety manager, which pretty much every restaurant has to have one of them, you used to have to get licensed every 3 years. We're trying to make it every 5 years. There was a fee that's been $500 that Massachusetts is $300. We're reducing that fee. If you live in a mobile home park and want to file a complaint against the mobile home park owner, you have to pay a $25 fee just to file the complaint. Seems a little crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah, that would seem to be a regressive tax against generally people who are lower income.
So we're trying to get rid of that fee. But my personal favorite is the frozen desserts.
The frozen desserts?
Frozen desserts.
Frozen dessert regulation?
Yes, well, it's, yes. So basically, if you have one of these machines that the frozen margarita or the ice cream comes out of, in addition to everything you have to pay a $160 fee to have that machine. However, there's a reason for it. Back in, I guess, the 60s or 70s, when you had those ice cream machines, they were all copper pipes. And copper pipes and ice cream make sense. But when they switched to the world of slushies, the acid from the juice and the copper pipes, bad combination, kids were getting sick the second they were drinking the slushies. So they created this license so that they knew who had the ice cream machines, so they could make sure that they had the proper tubing and that they weren't putting slushies in the bad pipes, because kids were getting sick. So it makes sense. It makes sense.
Well, listen, most regulations came at a time in response to something that went wrong. Totally understand that. We've written the 100 worst bills in Rhode Island, most outdated, absurd. Some of them go back to colonial times. But isn't that really the issue? Is that nobody goes through on a regular basis and goes through and, what is it, Nebraska, every other year you can only repeal a legislation, I think it is. One of the states, every other year you can only repeal a law. You can't pass a new law, which seems to make some sense, because there's endless numbers. And during my time in state government and working out with the legislature, you've been there, you've seen it. The legislators want to do something to address a problem, but they don't want to staff it. They don't want to put any resources into it. There's no funding source for it. So then the regulatory structure gets thinner and thinner and creates some problems in inspection and fairness and those types of things. So when you see all these after going through this process, how many of the, excuse me, did your toes just curl at that you just said, oh my God, we've got to get these done and get rid of these as quickly as possible?
Oh, there's plenty, right? I mean, and that's why it's so exciting for me to work under the Armando administration to try to make changes that I know make business owners crazy. A great example was the biggest complaint that I suffered as a business owner and heard from so many of my colleagues and other business owners was trying to get the letter of good standing from the Division of Taxation. The biggest frustration that all business owners felt. You needed taxation to basically prove that you've paid your taxes off. And to try to get that form was such a challenge. What we did a couple years ago was to co-fund an event where they went through what's called a lean streamlining event, where they said, okay, it used to take this amount of time and we want to get to this amount of time. So they were averaging about 97 days on average to get that.
And when you need it because you're refinancing or so time is of the essence in many cases, and their average time period was 97 days.
97 days.
Yeah, that's a deal killer.
Now we're down to 23 days, and they're still working harder to get that. That puts us in line with what most states do. They are trying to do a lot more to make that easier. We're really trying to encourage them to get their forms online too, so that we can avoid a lot of that back and forth that you experience when you're trying to get that. But so that's been a dramatic change. That is probably the biggest complaint we used to hear. I think we dealt with cases of those, several a week, especially towards the end of the year when you're really trying to get it done. And now we're lucky if we get one a month. We just don't get these complaints very often anymore.
A lot of the regulations, I remember previous to launching a media company, owned ad agencies, and one of the regulations was for how the revenue taxed folks in the advertising and what functions were taxable versus which weren't. And the descriptions of those that they claimed were taxable talked about technology that was 20, 30 years old, that an ad would get cut up and posted on a board, which hadn't been done in decades. Actually, I never worked in that industry accordingly. So is there any kind of regulatory review of the regulations in any macro sense to be able to go through and help all the departments? And by the way, taxation isn't built for writing the regulations about the advertising industry any more than I am about writing the tax regulations. And so that process took years for them to correct it. Are those outdated regulations across the board being looked at?
Yes, so through the process called the APA, they have to review every single regulation between now and, I believe, August.
Okay.
They've already repealed about 3,800 pages of regulations.
So that's a full 1%? No, just teasing.
Well, one that people were really excited about was the mimosas.
Mimosa regulation?
The mimosa regulation, that's what we call it at least. It used to be that you could not sell liquor before noon,
yes.
and the regulations changed, and now you can sell liquor on Sundays.
Right.
So we call it the mimosa change.
I believe both Molly and Kate cheered for the repeal of the mimosa regulation. Now, you'd been in business, yes. And then you came and worked at Commerce on the program side, and then went over to DBR. What's the difference you see between being in business and operating a department in state government?
I think it goes back to the how am I supposed to know? How am I supposed to know I need to do this? How am I supposed to know I need to do that? There are so many either rules or regulations or laws that you have to follow, and it's really hard to find that information out. So even hiring someone to do that for you still doesn't make it easy. So that's probably the biggest piece, is just not knowing where to go to how to find that information. So we are trying to create checklists to do. Yeah. We're trying to create more sort of frequently asked questions on websites so that you can have this information, so that you have that. It's just that it's so much. There's so much, right?
Yeah.
So to your last question, the best thing that people can do is two things. One, join an association. Mm-hmm. Business owners join an association, whether it's a chamber, merchant association, trade organization, because you now have people who can relay your concerns. And the second part of it is you need to relay your concerns, right? You can't complain about business stuff without telling anybody about it, because when we hear about it, we try to do what we can do to fix it. There's no way we can fix and make everything better, but we've made great progress, I think. The complaint volume, again, has dropped dramatically, but it's a whole lot easier when the business owners tell us what the problem is. And we don't expect them to say, well, I have a problem with regulation XYZ. They usually say, this is my problem, and then we do the research to figure out what it is. But you've got to get that word out. Tell us what the problems are, and we can tell you. And I'll tell you that very often people will come to complain to us, and we'll say, well, no, actually you can do that, or you can't do that,
yeah.
which is in your favor. So we find that quite a bit.
Do you have folks who specialize in sort of helping small businesses meander their way through the regulatory process? And if so, how do people access that?
So at the Commerce Corporation, there have always been a team of people who are there to assist business owners. So what we'll do is make an appointment. We'll either do it by phone or email, or you can sit down and meet and say, what's your situation? Are you starting? Are you trying to grow? Are you trying to go international? Are you really in a bind, having troubles? And they can let you know about all the resources that are out there, because there are a ton of resources that nobody knows about. Right. And a lot of them are free, if not most of them. So there's just a ton of resources out there, whether it's counseling, mentoring, classes. There's just a ton of information out there for business owners. They just have a really hard time accessing it. So actually, we've created what we call the Small Business Hotline. Mm-hmm. It's just a dedicated phone number.
Stefan Pryor answers this personally?
Well, sometimes, maybe, when we're a little overwhelmed. But it's...
he picks it up and says, what can I do for you? So
521-HELP is the number. There are a team of people, again, always there to answer
They're in
phones.
Rhode Island.
They're in Rhode Island.
Okay, good, thank God.
They're in Rhode Island, and they will see what your situation is, and they'll help you out. If you want to complain about a business issue, that's the place to send that information as well.
And can they help you? These are folks at Commerce.
Yep.
And can these folks help you meander your way, find guidance through other state departments as well? Or is this just limited to the programs of Commerce?
Yes, if they want the hand-holding, we'll hand-hold them through the service.
Okay.
So we've had a couple of very interesting medical companies who want to come to Rhode Island.
Right.
And they need to work with the Department of Health, but they're not quite sure where in the Department of Health, because they're something entirely new or different. So we've done a lot of hand-holding in that space, where we get them in front of the right people who might not be the right person, but they'll help connect us to the right person. And then we're hand-holding through the process to say, all right, what kind of license do you need? Same thing with municipalities. Sometimes they're not quite sure where they want to move their business to, and we'll kind of help shop that around for them. So they'll do as much as a quick answer to spending months together working on a problem.
And are you seeing any adverse impact in cutting through the red tape with the early retirements, where you start losing huge amounts of institutional knowledge of senior people who've been in departments for 20 plus years, who kind of know the shortcuts to everything? Have you seen any implications from that? I remember I was in state government during the first and biggest one under Sunland, and it took a good year for the state to kind of flush its way out and get the right people back in the right places.
It depends on the agency, right?
Yeah.
So I have heard stories of maybe one or two agencies where they're really losing some very valuable members. But I do think it gives an opportunity to bring in a fresh set of eyes and a fresh mind. So, it's definitely a blessing and a curse at the same time.
What are you most proud of in some of these regulatory changes?
That letter of good standing was really a
Yeah.
big win. So very, very exciting that. One of the other things we're trying to do is make it easier to open up a restaurant. So
Yeah.
we have taken the time to say this is what it used to take, and this is a simplified version. What was interesting to us is it's not a dramatic change.
Mhm.
It was more about providing these are all the things you could potentially have to do so that you don't get tripped up later on further down. So we're really excited about we're pretty close, a couple of months away from providing a roadmap of sorts that says this is how you open up a restaurant. So we're really excited about that.
And then it'll guide you through each of the communities and their related complexities, or is it just limited to the state structure?
It connects you with the municipalities. It's going to be up to the municipality to provide us with the information on the local level, but it pulls everything together for the state. And it's the construction piece of it too. So it's not just the food piece. If your restaurant's going to be on the water, that presents a whole new set of problems.
Absolutely.
So we'll be capturing that as well.
Biggest frustration?
Sometimes it's the amount of time it takes to get something done. It can take a long time by design. You don't want to make dramatic change for certain areas of government that
Locating a nuclear power plant, maybe we want that process to go a little slower, a few more eyeballs on it. But, somebody who is trying to open up a French fry place down at the beach ought to be able to. I know there's some grease issues and some venting, but it really shouldn't take months and months and years and years.
There's been, I think probably early on in my tenure over at the Commerce Corporation, there was not as quick of a response in pretty much across the board. Now we have Amica, our insurance company up in Lincoln. They have been doing free customer service training for state employees.
Oh, that's great.
And you have seen a dramatic turnaround in the response times, in the customer service, and also to a certain extent, once you all start talking about it, everybody gets a little happier at their job. Now, I'm not going to say everybody's
absolutely.
happy, but
Yeah,
by doing
no,
that,
absolutely.
yeah, it's been great.
And they have a better understanding of what the importance of their job is. I think the next barrier is the municipalities, where you see a significantly different level of professionalism.
Well, for those 23
accordingly.
communities that
Yeah.
we did the streamlining event, Roger Williams University actually did do a customer service training for them as well. So we've seen quite a few people really, it opens up a conversation. It allows for people to talk about changes that can be made, and we are finding that the municipalities are for the most part really on board excited to make change as well.
Yeah, I mean, for somebody, everybody is stretched to limits. Everybody is busy. As a person who runs a business, the more things that can be done online, can be paid online, can be, 30 seconds versus, 3 weeks of rounds and abouts and all the others, I think is a huge plus. And, I'll also say, sometimes we hear from folks from government come on and say, well, this will make us as blank to other states. Saul Kaplan's going to be on, who's a champion of innovation. Maybe, maybe we should be the best. We have this advantage, and we talk about it on many a Monday about Rhode Island being this great place, this great incubator space to be able to do things. This is some of the things that Rhode Island can literally be the best at going. So,
and that's why we're really excited about the electronic permitting, to be the first state in the country that we know of that has the municipality connected to the state to do an interaction. We don't think that happens anywhere else.
That'd be great. I want to thank you, Liz,
Yep.
for coming on. It was great, and congratulations on the success you've been having so far. Look forward to seeing more of it and keeping us up to date on it. And pretty much, I think I feel comfortable saying anything that has gone wrong in this process, please blame on Matt Schief over at Commerce, because I think it's fully responsible for any of those failures. We're going to be right back with Saul Kaplan from Business Innovation Factory. We'll be back in about 1 minute. Thank you. We are back. It is Business Monday. Welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Josh Fenton with Saul Kaplan, Mr. Innovation, head of the chief catalyst over at the Business Innovation Factory. And I also want to thank our friends at Deepwater Wind for all their support. All right, Saul.
Hey, Josh.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Your friend got elected to be the mayor out in...
So excited for Alan Weber. He's
co-founder
of Fast Company,
yeah.
Been a longtime friend, been to our summit many
We interviewed
times,
him, Kate interviewed him,
including last year, where he challenged all of us to run for office, to get involved civically. And it was that week that he was at our summit that he learned that the incumbent mayor in Santa Fe, New Mexico, he would never have run against him,
yeah.
Same party, actually decided not to run again. And while he was with us here in Providence, he got encouragement from 500 innovation junkies from around the world sitting here at Trinity Rep, saying, "Run, Alan, run." He ran an incredible campaign. And don't you know, last week the election was held and he won. Interesting election, because it was one of the few places in the country that does this voting where you rank your votes. So you don't just vote for one, you vote 1 through X and you rank them. And then what happens is, if nobody has a plurality, right, what you end up doing is you take the lowest vote getter and you redistribute the second place votes until there's a winner. It took 4 rounds. It took 4 rounds, but Alan came out on top, and I believe either yesterday or today was sworn in as the new mayor of Santa Fe, New Mexico. We need more leaders like Alan. Incredible story. First time elected to office. Could not be more excited.
A pro politician, though. I think when he did the interview with with news editor Kate Nagel. He did wear a Boston Red Sox hat, if I remember correctly, just to show the hometown support.
Yeah, he's a special leader, and take a look at what he's going to do down in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I know I'll be down there to visit him, and we'll get him back up here to Rhode Island as well.
Great. Let's talk about snow. Is there a better way to deal with snow from an innovation standpoint than the chaotic way we seem to deal with snow here in Rhode Island?
Well, the last two times I was clairvoyant and was out of the state and got credit for my really great planning skills, and this time not so lucky. I'm here, we're hunkered down, we'll see. Already people are canceling meetings. I don't know whether it's real or not, but
we're going to get a big storm.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
We in John Giorgi we trust.
Okay.
John Giorgi is also, unlike some of the younger brethren on the television, is very conservative about overinflating snow prediction, and his missive today that's posted on GoLocal lends one to believe that this is a minimum of 8 inches and could be 18 to 20
so
inches.
I should leave here and get provisions.
You should leave here and get provisions immediately. Yes, right.
Okay.
Or you guys can slog over and knock on our door, and we will allow you in.
There you go. You'll share. You'll share.
Yeah,
your
we will
provisions.
absolutely share across the board. How are we doing in Rhode Island from an innovation standpoint? Let me give you some numbers.
Okay.
Jobs numbers came out for the month of January, and we lost 200 jobs in Rhode Island. Jobs numbers came out for February at the national level, and the country had a 1.5-year high, adding 313,000 jobs. We don't have the Rhode Island breakout yet. Rhode Island could have had a growth month. The rest of the country seems to be embracing a positive economy right now, and here in Rhode Island, a number of polls, including the one we did in the fall and others, are showing that the majority of Rhode Islanders think we're still on the wrong track. What is this disconnect between the nation's economy and perspective and Rhode Island's economy and perspective?
Well, first of all, let's talk about where we are in the cycle, and then I'll relate it to the rest of the country.
Right.
If you ask economists, they'll tell you we're pretty close to full employment, both
Right.
here, Rhode Island,
Yep.
and so looking at the total number of jobs, looking at the unemployment rate is not the right measure, right? Right now, we're in a cycle where a lot of people are employed. The problem is that they're not employed in ways that either produce the wages necessary to live in a higher cost place in the country or represent a job ladder that they can see a positive future, to increase the wage levels that you certainly need everywhere in the country, but here in New England,
Right.
For sure. So the first thing is we're at the top of that cycle right now, although the narrative, and our rhetoric as we head into silly season suggests otherwise. But that's the truth.
Yeah.
Now the question becomes, how do we stack up to other places in the country? And I think this part of the Rhode Island narrative that says we're usually the first one in and the last one out of every economic cycle has really hurt us. We need.
But that's not God's will.
Right.
I mean, that may be historical or claim to be historical, but it's not a mandate from God.
Is it fatalistic?
Right? Yeah, I mean, it seems to be.
We
Gary would come here and say that. If we called Len Ladaro, he'd say that. If we talked to,
of course not.
Of course not. We're allowed to break that cycle.
Yes, we are.
And improve the economy to a point, which is really the genesis of my question.
Yes,
which
of course. Yeah, so how do we get out of that cycle? And
Yeah.
so the way you get out of that cycle is, you don't get out of that cycle in 4 and 6 months, right? You don't even get out of that cycle in a single political cycle.
No.
It is a structural, you have to transform this economy and put us on the path to that.
But we haven't had any governors say, I support a stagnant economy. We haven't had any governors say, I like the fact that we're last into recovery and first out of recovery.
Right.
So,
It's harder.
by the way, you look at their resumes, they're all fairly educated men, Don Kachiri, Lincoln
women.
Allman, Bruce Sunland.
Yes.
Well, a woman now, but these predecessors were all men.
Right.
There seems to be something that we need to.
Well, we need to change the game.
Right.
We need to, politicians love to take credit when the economy is on the upswing, and they get blamed, when it's on the downswing. And the truth is, most of this is driven through macro economy and what happens nationally. Some of it is in our control.
Yeah.
And it's the way we position our own economy, the conditions here, how we put ourselves on a path to create better, higher wage jobs. It's how we fix our education and workforce development systems, so we're creating the workforce that can do those jobs. You don't turn that on a dime. You do that over a period of time by being really clear what's the vision of the kind of economy we can have here, being honest about where we are today and what it takes to get from A to B. That puts us on a sustainable path that transcends any one political cycle. That is so easy for me to stand here and say, and so hard for a politician to do, because they're worried about the next election and all the folks that are trying to unseat them and to paint a different picture. Right?
And either in fairness to the governor or to blame the governor, I'm not sure which, here's a governor who, these things, many aspects of the economy are working and are positive. Most people are employed. We're not in negative growth. We're in, but she doesn't get any credit for it, according to polling, pretty consistent across public opinion polls. And actually, the majority of people think we're on the wrong track, which is kind of the bellwether test of how people perceive their state performance. Yeah. So, is it time for, and I don't want to get into a political discussion, you can have that with Kate, but from a business standpoint, is it that it's not fast enough, it's not violent enough, it's the transformation, just people aren't seeing it and feeling it because it is incremental. And the things she may or may not be doing that might set us up for the future won't be seen or felt for years to come.
I actually believe that the governor has worked really hard to paint a positive vision, to give us the confidence to lay some of the tracks necessary to do this. Has made innovation and entrepreneurship more central, right, than it has been in the past. Has used incentive dollars to try to create a different narrative about the types of companies and the types of jobs that are going to come here. Has focused on education, and to the extent that she can make change, has tried to put us on that right path. Do I think it's bold enough? No, I think it has to be bolder, right? And I think it has to be crisper and clearer in terms of what that vision is and where we're coming from. But directionally, I think that Governor Raimondo has done a lot of good work to try to do that. It is hard sledding when you live in an environment that's as cynical as we are, where the history is exactly as you say.
The cynicism is all caused by being first into every recession and the last out of every recession.
It's not that there's not reason to be cynical. No, I'm a New Englander, I'm a Rhode Islander. I mean, it's not even just New England, cynicism. Rhode Island has its own special version of it here, right? We are best in breed at how to be cynical, but the truth is psychology really matters. If we don't start to get more people that are positive and share a vision and a belief that we can get there from here, then you end up in the mess that we're in today. And I think the governor is trying to change, and not just the governor, a lot of leaders. You know what really I look for? Not so much what people are saying publicly. I look at what people are saying behind closed doors. When somebody calls one of the CEOs here and says, give me the skinny, should I or shouldn't I make an investment here? Should I hire people here? Should I move a part of my company here? I don't want to know just what the politicians and leaders are saying publicly. I want to know what happens in the privacy of those closed conversations, and do we really have people who believe in the place, that are putting some of the reputation on the line to make it better, How vested are we? And so I don't just point at the public sector leaders. I point at leaders across the state and say we need more folks folks that believe in this place, that are willing to put their reputations and their capabilities on the line to actually change it and to do the bolder things around creating the talent and a workforce that can do this, about helping companies that are already here to be the innovators here so that they can get bigger regionally, nationally, and globally. This is a long-term path that we need to be on, and we need it to happen in the worst possible way because it affects people's lives here. Right, and so yeah, I mean we've got a lot more work to do, to get this right. But we all share a part of that, right? Not just pointing fingers at at our publicly elected leaders to do it.
Let's talk about innovation gone wrong.
Okay.
So I'm going to make a state that all innovation is not good innovation. There was an attempt at innovation, and it's hard to get a beat on what the intent of it was, but technology was taken to maybe make school zones safer, maybe raise revenue, maybe just annoy the crap out of just about everybody. But I think we're up to 11 of these traffic cameras are deployed by any person's measure as randomly as possibly could be. There seems to be no rhyme or reason as to where they're located. And in about 2.5 months have issued 20,000 violations, raising upwards of $2 million. And many are saying that this is just a very disturbing, regressive tax. No public education ahead of time, no announcement beforehand, barely a press release. You know, I think we wrote in an editorial, this is an administration that when they cut a blade of grass at a park, they send out a press release. But yet when they put out safety cameras throughout the city, they forgot to let folks know. Is this an example, I'm going to make the argument, of innovation just gone absolutely haywire?
So, well, first of all, as you know, I live in Providence. I'm sure one of those speeding tickets is in the mail.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
you might have 11.
So my wife and I can confirm, was it me or was it her, that went through the school zone. I mean, driving, I tried the other day to drive from my home up here on the east side to Olneyville where Biff is.
Yeah,
right.
At 25 miles an hour.
At 20, I mean, I tried to do it at 20. It was excruciating.
Oh, the people will run you off the road and kill you.
Yeah.
But it seems as random an idea as the state putting sensors on the highway without notification and giving everyone a ticket who drives 56 miles an hour. Listen, you give points for trying to find new ways to put more police on the street. This actually had the counter effect. They're taking police officers off the street to deal with the overflow.
So now
of
let's
tickets.
talk specifically about the innovation. First of all, one of my favorite all-time quotes, is everybody loves innovation until it affects them. And then not so much. But in this case, I have to say, there's a lot to learn about how the innovation process works. First of all, technology and emerging technologies are here and they can make our lives better. But just because they're here doesn't mean they're going to be used with the citizens' purpose in mind. Right? And so here's a classic example of an emerging technology, our ability, the cost is coming down to put the cameras and sensors and tracking and the software that sits behind it in place. Right? That's a really positive step because these emerging technologies can actually allow us not only to solve citizen challenges and customer challenges, but it could make Rhode Island this laboratory for change that we're modeling for the rest of the country.
Absolutely.
In this particular case, this is an example of lowest hanging fruit. They use the technology in a way that I tend to agree with you. I mean, were they really after solving the public safety challenge around our schools and what was the path to do that, or were they really about trying to raise revenue for the city? Right? I think the technology could add a lot of value, right? I think if the problem we're trying to solve is safety around our schools, we can use technology in creative ways to do it, right? I'm not so convinced that this particular deployment of technology, which some third-party vendor came in and put in place, right? So the city didn't have to spend any money up front, right, in order to raise money seems like a pretty good deal if you're trying to raise money for the city,
Yeah.
right? But not such a good deal if you're one of the 20,000 people, and I'm guessing there's a bunch of repeat offenders.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right, and so we try to cloak these things as being in the public's best interest, but the truth is they're more about who makes money from them or doesn't make money from them. The other aspect of this is even if the model is right, even if the use of technology to make our schools safer, even if that's the right answer, the way to engage people who live in these neighborhoods in creating solutions that they're going to support, even if it costs them some money, because it's doing something important to them, right? To just announce this, have it out, and have 20,000 tickets in the mail is the wrong way to run that railroad. Right?
There's a case in New York, I think the New York Times had it a few weeks ago, about Waze, the traffic app that shows you short ways to bypass traffic. And they have sent many a person off one of the New York highways through a very specific neighborhood and demoed that neighborhood where there's just backed up traffic and ruined their quality of life. You know, now they're asking town fathers to change roads to one-ways and things like that. Are we going to constantly see this sometimes jump ahead of technology with adverse impacts, and then humans are going to have to clean up the mess and find a solution to it?
The humans that have to be more proactive about how we use the technologies are those of us who actually live in the community, or go to the school, or go to a healthcare system, for treatment. Too much of this technology has been pushed at us, with institutions, public or private, pushing it at us in ways that they can make more money, as opposed to us pulling the technology to us because it actually solves problems that we have. And we have to be willing to pay for some of that, if we really want that value. Too much push, not enough pull of the technology, coming the other way. We see example after example of this in terms of the way we're using technology. I don't think we're going to slow down, the inexorable, pull of technologies into society to solve problems. The question is whether we're playing an active role or we're just watching this stuff happen to us, right? Like this particular example you're talking about. Take those cameras and the actual capability to be able to see what's going on around a school zone. I mean, imagine if we could take that capability and say, what can we do with that capability that would actually make us safer, that would actually deliver value to the community, and how do we pay for that technology in order to do it?
Not want to maximize the most revenue. Let me jump to another one. I believe you have 1, 2, 3 granddaughters?
I have 1, 2, 3 granddaughters.
Three granddaughters,
yes,
and
I do.
They have birthdays on an annual basis?
They all do. Yes,
They
2 of them share the same one.
That's right. What are the odds of that?
Imagine that.
And disturbing news: it was already scheduled to close of their 900 stores, 125 Toys R Us. But now it looks like the entire thing will be liquidated in short order. And Toys R Us, the country's leading toy store. Today's Monday, tomorrow's a snow day, and you find out that, oh my God, I forgot the twins' birthday, and you need a birthday present now. What do we do in this world of, yes, I'm hooked on Amazon Prime, but that's 2 days later. We're going to have very limited options in how you buy a toy in the United States of America, let alone all the job losses.
So fortunately, I might be the one who waited until the day before the kid's birthday to buy the present, but I can assure you my wife isn't. I can assure you she'd been thinking about that long before the event. But let's talk about retail and the continued disruption of retail, because
this is a huge category.
This is just another example in another category. If you're in the business of just selling me access to toys and games that I can get through multiple channels, including Amazon, right? Like, this is not clothing or food. I don't need to squeeze the melon, or try on the clothes. This is a game.
You need the game of life.
Right. And so I just need to get it. So who's going to get it to me efficiently, and who's going to get it to me at the lowest price that I can get it for? So if all you do is add value by distributing physical products, and you're the retail business, right, you're going to be disrupted. right? And we see it over and over and over again. We've had the conversations about retailers here in Rhode Island, right? And this is just the next category up. If you're in the toy distribution business, we're going to talk about Hasbro here in a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? What if you're making these
Yeah.
toys and games? But if your function is retail distribution, convenience and price for a known good, right? You're going to compete with online, and you better have a value proposition, a promise you're making to me, right? So if your promise is it's available and I can swing by the day before and I can get
That
it,
morning on the way to the birthday
you
party.
got Amazon experimenting with quick turnaround, just in time, shipments of these products, right? And even then, how do you sustain it? I think in the Toys R Us case, they've been hit head on with this. They didn't have a strategy or a new model of a way to engage their customers beyond just the physical distribution of the goods. And they got caught flat-footed, as you know, in a lot of these large retail chains. We saw it here even with Benny's here in Rhode Island.
Absolutely.
A lot of the value is in the real estate and real estate investment trust in this case with
Yep.
Toys R Us, where the investors are more interested in the real estate than they are in the ongoing concern that sits on the real estate.
Right.
The consequence of that in our communities is a lot of these retailers are going to get smaller and go out, and a lot of these big box, large scale, out in the suburbs type retailers, this is real estate that is going to change hands, and investors are going to look for the best use of those assets.
Are we going to see the death of each and every one of these verticals? We've already lost many of Best Buy's competitors, right?
Right.
Best Buy, depending on the quarter, is struggling or recovering depending on the month or the quarter or the year. Are we going to start seeing, especially when there's a downturn, whole verticals in which you literally just can't buy that thing that you used to be able to have 20 different options to be able to buy in a 10-mile driving radius, and everything's going to be online. It's going to be your only option.
Well, I don't know if it's going to be our only option. I actually believe the physical nexus, the store, is going to figure out how to repurpose. So we've talked about Whole Foods,
Yeah.
right? I think you're going to see new models and ways to deliver an experience, some of which I can get online, some of which I get because I physically go there. So in the Toys R Us example, right? Like, did they move fast enough to engage families and youth in what play means, what
Right.
learning means, and use the physical store as
Well,
a way to engage us?
I bet they
in that?
thought they did.
Well, no. Mostly what you had were aisles with toys stacked up, right? And,
There were end caps where you could play the video
please.
game.
They need to reimagine the experience and the proposition or promise that they're making to customers. I'm not so sure it's the death of. It's clearly being disrupted. It's going to get resized based on its ability to deliver value to customers that customers are willing to pay for.
All right, let's jump to Hasbro. Hasbro just lost a major distribution point.
Correct.
And stocks took a little tweaks. Hasbro stock was been racing for weeks and weeks, and I think was getting up to about $100 a share. And I think over the last few days, I don't know, I didn't look today, but it's taken a little bit of a haircut,
That's
a couple percentage point. Is that a long-term worry for them, or does that make them begin to rethink? And by the way, do they then start thinking about being the distributor and cut out some of these others? If I can't show it at Toys R Us and get that touch and feel and look at the different My Little Ponies, why can't they then start to think about distributing their own toys?
Here's the good news. If you're a fan of Hasbro or you're in Rhode Island and you're focused on the fact that they're headquartered here, right? This is not a new conversation at Hasbro. They have been for a long time now. Brian Goldner's been really strong on this, reimagining what Hasbro is. Are we a traditional manufacturer of toys and games,
right,
or are we a storyteller that engages youth and families on multiple platforms, a game, a video, a movie, into a story? Are we storytellers that activate those stories across multiple platforms? That's a very different business model than I'm a traditional toy and game manufacturer. They've been on this journey for some time. They've seen the writing on the wall about what happens if you're solely a manufacturer of with single channels.
Oh God, yeah. I mean,
And
they've
yes, I'm
transformed that.
sure I didn't look at their stock price. I'm sure Toys R Us has an impact, but believe me, they are aggressively moving to reposition themselves. They aren't starting today. You know, if you
Right.
start today, you know,
Yeah,
it's
you're
probably
done.
too late.
Right.
But they've been working on this for some time. I'm hopeful, and we need them to be successful here in Rhode Island because they employ a lot of those good high-wage jobs and career
Absolutely.
paths, you know, are sitting there. So we should be encouraging them. Again, we should make Rhode Island the place where they're able to explore and test those new models that they can be off to the races nationally and globally to do.
They started their own sort of version of a Comic-Con by having
Yes, they
it
did.
HasCom
Right.
last summer. Should they have a Hasbro store in Rhode
Right.
Island?
Well, they're gonna play with models across that whole continuum. They have a huge business trying to get rights to the media stuff and
You're
the
right.
movies and the stories, and you're right about the convening. It's all about storytelling, and it's
Right.
activating the stories, engaging people. So now I want the video game, I want the board game, I want to go see the movie, I want to watch the television program, and you bring stakeholders and advertisers and partners to that storytelling platform. Does that sound like a game company?
No.
Right. It sounds like a very different company, and it's no different than the conversations we've had about CVS, and
Mhm.
Aetna, right? If the narrative is we're a retailer that distributes goods that you can get in multiple places, in the end, you can't sustain the value of that. You've got to change that story to be about our capability sets can actually change the value equation for customers. Just the way we just finished talking about those cameras and sensors, that's a capability. It's the power to do something.
Right,
It's
absolutely.
how you combine and recombine them to change value. What are we tuning that technology and those capability sets for? It's the same discussion if Toys R Us had done it earlier. Maybe they'd be in a different place today, but they stayed to their knitting. We're a retailer. We distribute games and toys, and now they're getting crushed.
Maybe we should change the incentive relative to those traffic cameras in school zones, that if you drive the speed limit, you get a free Hasbro toy
There you go.
as you go by,
See? There
right?
you go.
Kind of grab the golden ring,
There you go.
slow down enough to be able to reach it accordingly. I want to thank you, as always.
Always fun.
We never miss a gosh darn thing. Predictions on tomorrow? Do you have a prediction on the snowstorm?
Well, am I going to go against John Grossi?
He's a weather
I
god.
predict it's going to disrupt the workday tomorrow. I'm pretty certain.
Let me tell you a
I'm
funny-
pretty certain of that.
Funny story. When we first launched, John Giorsi gives the Giorsi Factor every day, and he literally, it was like the first or the second day, and he calls me and he says, I'm having a trouble with the Giorsi Factor. I'm like, how could you be having trouble? It's named after you. He said, listen, it's complicated. There's going to be a weather front coming through, and it's going to rain at about 11 o'clock in the morning, mostly in Providence. And then it's going to blow through, but it's going to be beautiful in the morning, beautiful in the afternoon, and it makes the Giorsi Factor a little more complicated. And I said, well, listen, I know nothing. You do what you think. So literally, I had a meeting up at the other end of the city at about 11 o'clock. And I go out, literally, as I'm walking in the door, it starts pouring. I finish the meeting, I come back, and it becomes beautiful. I'm like, John Giorsi is a weather god. I will never doubt
There you
him
go.
ever
Don't doubt
in our
Yeah.
history.
All right, well, go URI and go PC in that order.
Yes.
But still, it's great for Rhode Island that both are in, and let's dance.
And
Yeah.
how far do you have URI going in your bracket?
You always put me out there, and I'm always afraid I'm going to jinx it. We should beat Oklahoma, right? We should.
Charles
we-
Barkley
we
said
should-
it on
we should-
the,
He did. He
he did.
showed some URI love, didn't he?
or
I
more
saw-
like Oklahoma hate, I think was his point.
Yeah, maybe. No.
And then you're feeling good about the Duke game as well?
We should win that game, and you know what? If we win that game and we get some of our mojo back, we lost a little bit of it at the end of the season, but if we get some of that mojo back, we'll give Duke a tough game. So we'll see.
We played Duke twice in
Yep.
my lifetime. Tommy Garrick, Silk Owens' team
Yep.
lost by 3 or 4 points. And then prior to that, the Sly Williams team, I believe, lost by 1
Yes.
to the Duke team with
heartbreaker.
Gene Banks and
Yeah.
Mike Kaminsky that went all the way to the
Bad
finals
memory.
and lost to Kentucky.
Bad memory.
Thank everybody for tuning in today on Business Monday. Thank our friends at Deepwater Wind for all their support. And from the Navigant Credit Union, tomorrow is snow chaos. Tune in. We have a lot going on, starting probably earlier than 3 o'clock, probably with some pop-ups throughout the day, giving some people some insights into everything that's going on related to the storm. Thanks, everybody. Over and out. See you tomorrow.